Okay, good evening and welcome to the Township of Woolwich Council meeting on April 25th, 2022. Apologies for the late start time. We had a couple of closed session items to finish up. We're now live on YouTube and I will do a roll call of council. I, Mayor Shantz, am present and chairing this meeting. Councillor Martin.
Present.
Councillor McMillan.
Present.
We have regrets from Councillor Merlihan, Councillor Redicop.
Present.
And Councillor Shantz.
Present.
Thank you. Can I have a motion that council reconvenes in open session, please? Moved by Councillor McMillan and Councillor Shantz. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. I'm going to start with the land acknowledgement and then a moment of silence. The land on which we meet has been here from time immemorial. People have inhabited southern Ontario for about 10,000 years, and we acknowledge the Attawandaron, also called the Neutral people, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee peoples who lived here when settlers arrived, and who share this land with us. May we together learn to care for our flora and fauna and the land we inhabit together. I'm always touched by the gentle openings of our First Nations leaders, acknowledging the interconnectedness, as they always do, of all creatures and plants, and reflecting on how we too are part of our expansive ecosystem helps ground us and our decisions in the greater good. So as we begin our meeting, let's remember that we are part of a broader world that exists of people of many backgrounds, and a world that consists of more than just people. Take a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest this evening? Seeing none, there are no items to come forward from closed. We do have minutes from Council of March 28th, Committee of the Whole from April 11th, and Special Council from April 11th. Can I have a motion that those minutes be adopted? Councillor Redicop, seconded by Councillor Shantz. All those in favor? That is carried. Was there, I'll just double check with Councillor McMillan. Was there a, are you good with the minutes? Yeah, okay, good. I didn't see your hand.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Just wanted to check in case I missed something. There's no public meetings, presentations, or delegations, and no unfinished business. So we'll get right to the consent agenda. Before we pass a motion approving and receiving the consent agenda, the council can remove any items for further discussion. Councillor Shantz.
Yeah, could I pull the gravel pit tender 12.1.4?
Okay. Anything else, council? Okay. Can I have a motion on everything except 12.1.4? That includes correspondence and items for information, I believe. Yeah, moved by Councillor Shantz, second by Councillor Redicop. All those in favor? And that's carried. 12.1.4, the gravel tender award. Councillor Shantz, go ahead.
Thank you. This question about the tender might not necessarily be for Mr. Poupé, it might be for Mr. Vink, but going to the Jigs Hollow gravel pit, were they not supposed to do some paving on Jigs Hollow and Peel Street with that application, or am I totally out to lunch on that?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Shantz. No, that's accurate. There is to be some paving done from Northfield up to the pit. But we're looking at Jigs Hollow Road, and we can look at that stretch to see if it requires anything just to get us through. But if not, we're aware of that section. So I think that's the intent here of this year on Jigs Hollow, is to get what needs to be done, appreciating that the pit owner will be responsible for upgrading that stretch from Northfield in.
Yeah, so that was my question. Could we just do everything except that section? That would save us some dollars, would it not?
Yeah, and through you, Mayor Schutz, to Councillor Schutz, I think we just have to be concerned with our obligations. That's all, right? And so if it is in need of some material, we will have to place some material just to be compliant with our MMS. But that's correct. We don't have to look to beef it up for the 7-year cycle that we're aiming for right now. So we could just do sort of a bare bones approach, knowing that it will be reverted.
Okay, I can leave that in your hands, and then I will pass the tender then, or pass the motion for the tender.
Absolutely.
Or bring the motion to the tender.
Okay, can I have a motion for 12.1.4 then, the gravel tender? Councillor Shantz, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to staff reports and memos, and we will start with termite control program and Mr. Heichert. Hey, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Shantz. So the memo here tonight speaks to the parts of the termite program that have been completed over the last year. The program started in May of 2021 with borate treatments and the installation of traps on active and peripheral properties. The traps were then inspected a total of 12 times from May until October, with over 3 million termites being taken out of the ground. Treatments of nematodes were done on active properties, one in the spring, one in the fall. The removal of dead trees and stumps were also done last year on certain properties. Another big part of the program was the yard cleanup weekend, which happened in June, removing large amounts of termite infested wood. The cleanup weekend was well received by the residents, and I think the bins started to get filled up as soon as they were kind of dropped off on the Friday morning, which was great to see. In addition to the memo, I thought it was important to note that the property owners have had a big part of the success of the first year of the program. The cleanup weekend was the most significant part, as I mentioned, but there has also been a lot of good questions, communication, and education between Dr. Miles, his staff, and the residents during their inspections. And before the program started last spring, I also wanted to note that we had all the roughly 140 property owners sign an authorization form acknowledging that they were aware of the program, and the response back to getting those signed forms was positive from the community, which was great to see. So for the next steps of the program in 2022, those have been outlined in the memo, and they're similar to the work items that were completed in 2021. Monitoring traps will be replaced early in May and will start to be inspected every 2 weeks, as well as second cleanup weekend is planned for June. And as an update to the residents, staff will be sending out a summary update to those who are in the program area later this week. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions council may have regarding the memo or the termite control program.
Council, what questions? Councillor McMillan?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. This is it's great news to hear how well this is going. I'm gonna ask a question. If you don't have an answer right now, that's fine. But do we have any idea of how many people opted not to participate? And I know there was like a number there where the program operators said if we don't reach this threshold, it's not worth doing. Were we close to that threshold, or has the uptake been so overwhelming that that's not an issue anymore?
Yeah, through Chair or Mayor Shantz to Councillor McMillan, it was so overwhelming, which was just amazing to see. We basically had 100%. So it was just so well received by the community, and yeah, I think it's a really great thing. Really great.
That's excellent. Thanks. That's fantastic to hear. Thank you.
Super. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. I think that was just for information, wasn't it? Let me check here. Yep. So there's no motion that we need for that. So thank you very much for the report and for all the work there. Almost 100% is fantastic. Okay, thank you. Phased hybrid council meeting. Clerk Smith.
Thank you, Mayor Sean. Through you, this report is really just to get council's feedback on plans to return to the council chambers. So you can see I've outlined, 3 possible phases to have council sort of move back into chambers a little bit further. We have done some things like spreading our tables out so that all tables have 6 feet between them. And then if council wished, we could have council members start returning in May this year. And then kind of in the summer, we might allow that to kind of expand further. And as I said in the report, it would probably be having, members of the public, delegates, presenters who either wish to attend in person or don't have internet connection or otherwise have the capacity to join remotely. And then kind of a full opening you probably can see I said at a time to be determined still. We are watching that, but really I think that the biggest thing is on that kind of phase 1 idea, is council interested in returning to council chambers in the month of May. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions and interested in council's feedback.
Council, how do you feel? Essentially, we've been doing hybrid meetings all the way through, really. There have been a couple of us in the council chambers off and on, but I'm just looking at the number of desks around. So staff would continue to be remote then for now?
I think we would have staff come in if needed, sort of on an as needed basis. I think there might be some times when staff would like to be in presenting to council, but then still allowing staff to join remotely by Zoom. And I think there's also a benefit there where some staff, can be sort of at council's call if they're needed, and then stay home if they're not needed and they don't have to be sitting in work waiting to be called on.
Okay, thanks. Councillor McMillan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Shonks. Through you, I don't mind going ahead of Councillor Shonks after he thought he was the only one talking tonight. Some feedback because you asked for it. I think it's fantastic if we can do it, if we can continue doing hybrid indefinitely going forward, especially for members of the public and for delegations. I think that it's been fantastic. The increase in participation from the community during COVID and the ease at which they can participate now. And I'll touch on this in my next point of feedback, but like you said, not having to have staff be at work all night if they're only needed for a few minutes, not having members of the public have to come down to council chamber, sit there for 3 hours to do their 8-minute delegation. If they can kind of have their Zoom meeting on and in the background and then pop on when they're needed. I think that that's a great way that we can be more accessible to our constituents. So I'm happy some of our neighboring municipalities have gone back to solely in person, and I'm really happy to see the recommendation that we're doing a hybrid because I think it's great for our constituents. I'm fully in support of having staff be able to be available on Zoom. I think that we can trust staff to figure that out, who needs to be in council chambers and who can kind of have the meeting on at home and be available if necessary. And I think for a lot of things, really, we can take that question away and come back is a really appropriate answer as well. I think that we can be respectful of staff's time and use this technology to improve their work-life balance as well. In person, I think that it's interesting. I don't know about this one, about whether we want to say that council has to come back at some point except for special circumstances. I think that that's maybe something that we say, that council is generally expected to be in council chambers, but I think that it's been fantastic. I know there's been some councilors that have been out of the province and been able to attend the meetings, and I think that's great. So I think that that should continue. I think maybe, again, it's up to council to kind of, you know, decide for themselves whether they need to be in the chambers or you know, if they can do it remotely. I think, me personally, I probably wouldn't do remote, you know, unless I was out of the area, but I don't know if I would want to be the person to say to another counselor that they can't decide to call in from home on a given night. So I don't know where I fall on that one, but pretty happy with the other suggestions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Redekop and then Councillor Shantz.
Yeah, I like Jeff's phased-in approach, and I agree with much of what Councillor McMillan said, that I think we should keep the hybrid model because I think it allows more people to be involved, and so I agree with that, Councillor McMillan.
Okay, Councillor Shantz.
Well, I'm going to have to agree with Councillor McMillan as well. The only question I have is maybe Jeff can just explain to us, councillors and the public, what kind of technology we have in-house now that would make this work. You know, cameras and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so through you, Mayor Shantz, we did actually make use of the Municipal Modernization Fund that the province provided for small municipalities. I want to say last year, sort of mid-2021, to upgrade our council chambers. We have new and improved mics and sound. We have 2 cameras, and then there's a lot of technology in the back that allows us to live stream either on Zoom, or if all members of council and anyone sort of speaking at the meeting were all in the room together, we would still be able to live stream that. And of course, as you, as council probably noticed in the memo, we are proposing live streaming to continue on sort of indefinitely. So we'll still be able to do that even if all of council decides to return to council chambers, and if at some point we want to move away from the Hollywood Squares kind of view. I guess I'll just mention on the other hand that it has actually worked fairly well, keeping your devices with your cameras on, so that everyone has sort of the same size picture and stuff like that, and then we can pivot really quickly if there were, you know, something urgent that happened or a quick change that happened at night. So kind of liking this view for now, but we are able to, with the technology we have, we are able to go completely in person with the meeting and then still continue to live stream indefinitely.
Okay, and so my other comment is I do like the hybrid model as well. I think it allows people to be there when they're away, but it also allows them to check back in later on in the week if they've missed it, and if they want to view it later on. So by having it recorded all the time, I think that's an advantage as well. So I would agree with that, and also let the councillors or staff decide if they want to come to the chambers or not. So those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. Clerk Smith, just to clarify then, the recommendation coming in May, if council is all in the chambers, we would each bring our device and use it would be a Zoom, essentially a Zoom meeting. We would just be in the same room.
Yeah, that's correct. So for anyone that hasn't been in recently, we've still been using all of our devices. We're still using them for the video aspect. There are microphones for everyone that just kind of pick up the sound a little bit better when you're in chambers. So we would still recommend that council bring their devices to the meeting and continue that way, at least for the foreseeable future. We do have, and I guess this is maybe where Councillor Shantz was getting, we do have the ability to do sort of custom videos, but it takes a little bit more work in terms of zooming in and zooming out on each counselor, or changing the camera angle a little bit. So still thinking this is probably the way to go for now.
Councillor Shantz.
The question I would have then, do we have the bandwidth that we can all be on Zoom at the same time?
That's a good question.
Yes, through you, Mayor Shantz, we are looking at improving our bandwidth to handle even more participation and that, so that we're ready for both now and into the future.
Councillor McMillan.
If we lack the bandwidth, we can just sit beside each other and get 2 heads in each square.
We'll let Jeff work the fancy cameras. Councillor Martin, did you want to weigh in at all? No, he's good with it. Okay. Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I think the hybrid model is a great model for all the reasons that have been stated, and so look forward to it. So Clerk Smith, you'll give us a little more instruction before our meeting in May.
Yeah, so through you, Mayor Shantz, what we'll likely do is we'll probably ask council sort of at each meeting, if you're planning on attending, we'll have everything set up for anyone who is planning on being here in person. And then, of course, for anyone, whether it's a family or an urgent family matter, illness, I think that's one thing we've learned from the pandemic, is that if you are sick, stay home. If anything like that happens urgently, we'll just be ready to switch you to or keep you on Zoom. But we'll send out instructions with your next council packages.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. 13.3 Ontario Land Tribunal Improvement Recommendations. I will call on Ms. Fries, Director of Development Services. Welcome to our meeting.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This report is in response to the motion that came to council back in February 2022 about the dissolving the OLT. At that time, staff had mentioned that that was not something that we'd be in support of, but we would be in support of some changes to the OLT. So this report is in response to that motion. We've come back with a revised recommendation for council to request that the OLT be reviewed instead of actually dissolved.
Okay. Are there questions? No? Okay, there's a recommendation there that, well, you can read it. There's a number of whereases, and the request is that we make the recommendations to the Ontario Land Tribunal requesting the Government of Ontario to conduct a review of the Ontario Land Tribunal and send a copy of the motion to a number of politicians. Mover and a seconder, Councillor McMillan, Councillor Shantz. Councillor McMillan, you wanted to add something?
Just wanted to say thanks for the work that went into this. I think this is extremely important. There's a lot of decisions that get taken out of our hands that limit our ability to represent our constituents' best needs. So really appreciate staff putting obviously a lot of time and energy to determine the best course for us to take here for Woolwich. So thank you to staff for putting this together.
Okay, all those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. Thanks. We have the Environmental Registry of Ontario opportunities to increase missing middle housing and gentle density, including supports for multi-generational housing. Mr. Vink.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. So the province has posted on the ERO for 30 days that they're looking for some information to how to provide the missing middle, as it's called, and that's defined as a range of multi-unit housing types compatible with the scale of single detached neighborhoods that have gone missing from many of our cities. And Examples are laneway housing, garden suites, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, row houses, townhouses, and low and medium rise apartments. So they're talking about ways to do this, to provide for that missing middle, and they're looking for, they put 4 questions out to municipalities and well, to the public. So looking for some responses from us in that sense. So the staff thought it was important that we respond because we want to make it clear what we see as issues that is maybe impacting that opportunity for the missing middle. So first question from the province was, what's the biggest barriers and delays to diversifying the types of housing built in existing neighborhoods? One of the biggest things we're finding in existing neighborhoods that the cost in, we're not the same as some of the cities and some of the other areas where the land values are high enough that they're going to acquire the lands and redevelop them. So the cost benefit isn't always there in cases such as Elmira and St. Jacobs and Breslau, for example. So we're not seeing what maybe some other places might. So it's not the same. And without those costs, the benefits outweighing the costs, we're not going to see those changes. And I would say that even in Elmira and St. Jacobs, we have areas where some of these kind of developments can take place, but we haven't seen it happen just because it's not cost effective. One of the things we've also wanted to note was, the province about 2 years ago, we changed the regulations to allow up to 3 units on a property. And we've seen a lot of uptake on 1 accessory dwelling unit coming into play, but not more than 1, generally speaking. And most of that is because we're seeing that in new housing, the houses aren't easily built and split into more than 2 or 3 units. It's hard to do it. So getting the 1 accessory dwelling unit is easy, maybe in a basement or in something like that, but getting more units is just a challenge. So we're not seeing that uptake just because it's just not cost effective to get the 2nd or 3rd unit. One of the other challenges we face as a municipality is whether we have the adequate water and sewer capacity. And it's not just capacity at a plant, but it's also capacity in a pipe in that street. So some of our older streets, we do have some capacity limits. So there would be some concern there if it was too much of intensification. We couldn't actually handle the sewage flows and water flows demands in some cases. We'd have to upgrade our servicing. So there would be cost to the municipality to keep up if there was big changes that take place. Some of the barriers we're also seeing is some of the studies that are required to go through planning approvals. And we're talking noise studies, for example, and some transportation studies. Those studies take time because they have to get done and completed, but they cost the applicant money. And oftentimes these studies come back with very similar results and recommendations. So we see there's opportunities here that maybe these could be standardized a little more and made a little more efficient, that we could reduce some of those costs in that sense. Parking can be a barrier. In every case we're looking at, if you add more units, you usually add more parking, but parking means you need to have somewhere to put that parking. So that's a challenge in many properties, is where to get that parking to be put in place. And that's more of an issue, especially in our areas like Elmira and St. Jacobs, for example, than maybe a city like Waterloo or Kitchener, which has transit they can rely on and not demand that extra parking. So there's a bit of a differences that we have to realize take place. And one of the challenges we always have is that as soon as we see increased density requirements, we often get people coming in saying, not in my backyard. And that is just a challenge we face as staff and as council and as communities, is that not in my backyard, do I want to see this in my location? Staff also want to highlight question number 2 that the province put forward is, what further changes to the planning and development process would you suggest to make it easier to support gentle density and providing this missing middle? Province suggested as of right, changing the number of units on any property up to 4. So no more, forget the singles, forget 3, up to 4 units on a property. That doesn't necessarily solve anything, because it doesn't mean that the barriers are gone to allow it to take place, those economic barriers. So as of right, zoning may make it a little bit faster. There's still that economic problem that sits there. So that doesn't always solve the problem. Staff isn't also recommending that we go all the way up to 4 units as of right, just everywhere. We think there's opportunities where that makes more sense in some communities than others. So we would suggest that, in the agriculture areas, that may not make sense. In some of our newer subdivisions that are further away from downtown areas, it doesn't make sense necessarily to see 4 units as of right. But in and around our downtowns, that makes more sense. And we already have some zoning in place for some of that. So it does make sense in better spots, not just everywhere. One of the other items is, just in terms of doing this, we want to make sure we go in the areas where there's a walkable community. We've got the form and the scale. So we want to see the urban design match. So We don't want people buying up properties, tearing them down, just slapping something up because they have as of right zoning to slap up a building that's 4 units that doesn't look good. We still want some design controls so we make sure it looks good in our community. And then lastly, like we noted, that if the province can come up with a way to standardize the noise or some of these studies a little more efficiently, that they don't have to spend as much money, that would be a bonus too. There are 2 other questions that are noted by the province, if we're aware of any other inventive approaches anywhere else across the world, but not that we're aware of anything new or exciting or very different. And their question number 4, are there any other changes that would help support other opportunities for missing middle generation, multi-unit generation housing? There's not much there that staff could come up with, but we thought it was important that we bring this forward, but council will hear this and then kind of bring our comments back to the province. Comments are due by the 29th of April because it's a 30-day time period. So if council does want to respond, staff has the recommendation before you, just outlining some of these things we brought forward in the report. Feel free to answer any questions or comments if there's anything else from council.
Okay, thank you, council. Councillor Shantz.
Thank you through to Mr. Vink. Thank you for the report. I'm glad that you noted, and I think it sometimes gets missed that the smaller communities in the townships are not like the big cities. And I think they have to realize that somewhere along the line, because it is different with what we're looking at. And so I'm glad you noted that, and I like your recommendations. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor McMillan.
Yeah, I appreciate Mr. Vink's work on this. I wonder if there are, we've addressed what barriers exist that the province can help us with. I wonder if there's barriers that council can help with as well. Councillor Shantz makes an astute point that we don't want high density, even probably mid density in the subdivision that we have in Heidelberg or some of the St. Jacobs ones. But I think that I believe that there's barriers that exist even within our township that council could help. I think we've seen buildings proposed and applied for in Elmira that would have provided desperately needed housing types that we've lost because of some compromises that were made to meet the need of council and the neighborhood here. And in the end, was that the right thing? I don't know. So I wonder if, along with this, addressing what barriers exist that the province could help with, if council should take a look at what we can provide to help facilitate some of this missing middle housing.
Ideas, Mr. Vink?
Yeah, not so much a question, but happy to hear the feedback.
Yes, through you, Mayor, to Councillor McMillan. So yeah, nothing hurts from ever taking a look at what you're doing and trying to make it better. So that's my philosophy about a lot of things. It doesn't hurt to take a look. We will be, reviewing our official plan again once the region does theirs. So that's an opportunity to really take a good look at some of this and say, what do we want to change at the official plan level, which we can then translate into zone changes and maybe move it along a little bit faster if we want to. But there's opportunities there to say, like, what can we reduce those barriers? Can we, in certain areas, give that as of right zoning or put that in place and put those requirements in place that they don't have to come into council for a zone change. They're just going through site plan, for example. So those are examples where we can do that, but we want to do that in a manner that we are, I think, as council and the community understands what we're dealing with and what we're getting into, and that we're all happy with the potential outcomes that are going to take place. So definitely opportunities, and I think the best opportunity will be when we start up with the official plan review.
Okay. Oops. Anyone else? I have a question or maybe some clarification that I'm looking for. I understand that we want to keep the density sort of into the the center of town sort of thing, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the agricultural parcels and maybe it's just the as of right piece that that is part of my question. I know on a number of farms we call them the dotty houses, right? You've got 2 or 3, maybe as much as 4 generations living and working on the farm of one family. So how do those fit into this? Are they 2 separate issues?
Yes, to you, Madam Mayor. It's under our current regulations we already have in place. We've allowed dotty houses probably about a good 10 years ago. We allowed the second unit that looks like one big house, but it's almost like a semi. So we've allowed that style in our larger farm parcels. And that's the larger farm parcels. And then, as noted, about 2 years ago, we changed the zoning to allow up to 3 units, which is the main unit and 2 accessory units. That's permitted on agricultural properties too. So we did broaden things up about 2 years ago. That's why you're not seeing as many of these mobile home grand garden suites, as we call them, on the farm properties anymore for 3-year temporary use renewals, because we allow things as of right now, and we're starting to see those come as of right. So we're already helping that multi-generational process. So they're not looking for more. I haven't heard of that being a concern that they need more. And we don't want to encourage the loss of agricultural land with lots of multi-residential housing on farm parcels. So I think we got it covered under our current zoning, and that's in place already.
Okay, thank you. Would someone like to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Shantz, seconded by Councillor Redekop. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And the next piece is yours too, Jeremy. More Homes for Everyone Act.
So yes, so when the province puts things out, they like to do it and just put a bunch of them out at once. So this is another one, 30 days. The time period is up at the end of the month. We're able to, at the end of the month, to bring this information to the province and respond. So it is More Homes for Everyone Act, as they called it. And for some reason, which we're not quite sure of how it all works, the province actually passed Bill 109, which implemented all these requirements during their commenting period. So the province has actually approved this as of April the 14th, where they're still looking for comments. So we'll have to take that as hoping they'll listen to some comments and maybe make changes. However, major changes that they're proposing, and this is for zone changes and site plans, for example, and official plan amendments, is the refunding of fees if we do not process applications in a timely manner. So as we start to go further and further away from the timelines, we just have to start refunding fees to the greater, more and more, up to 100% if we're over our timelines. Obviously, that's a bit of a concern to us as the municipality in terms of both planning and finance. Makes a lot of extra work to refund people money, but it also means if we're refunding, we're losing money as a municipality based on our budget. So some of the concerns around this happen to rely with the fact that the time periods are very short, and we rely on other agencies to give comments also, like the region and the GRCA. So sometimes they can't get comments to us in a timely manner for us to even move forward with the report. I can tell you, for example, we just received comments from one of the agencies this past week to a public meeting that we had back about a month and a half ago. So that lag can happen. That's going to impact the municipality, meaning we might have to refund people money because we can't get all the comments in place. The same as sometimes we give comments back to the developer or the applicant and saying we need to see changes before we can bring this back to council. And that may often take them months, to some extent, almost a year sometimes. And that would then again impact the municipality because we're not hitting the timelines they can ask for refunds. So those are examples of why we have some concerns around the refunding process. So as noted, they could penalize the township as a result of other parties, not our own failure. From our own perspective, it would mean we'd have to bring reports back very quickly. And that means turnaround staff time very quickly on applications and get them back to council. It then means we have to have the information in front of us right from day one to make that decision on. In the cases that we're talking about, and often in zone changes, we don't have all that information. That's where you have the public meeting. We get some questions, we get some dialogue, and we kind of go back and forth. So we don't always have all that information, which means that if that's going to happen and we have to still bring a report to council, we're moving forward with a recommendation report to either deny an application right off because we don't have that information, or to put some sort of holding provision on and saying they're coming back to council. Ultimate end result means that the applicant maybe is coming back 1 or 2 times and paying twice as much money because they're going through the process multiple times because they couldn't get through in the first round, which doesn't make good sense either. It wouldn't give us any time to do peer reviews. So there would be no timelines in there to do peer reviewing of any reports. So that would be a concern too if we want to do anything, especially along the lines sometimes of our gravel pits. We wouldn't have opportunity to do any peer reviewing. And like I noted, it would just make that we'd have to move staff time, and that means with limited movements, with a limited staff and trying to get through applications fairly quickly, it may result in the need to actually look at our staffing resources and how we're going to be able to accomplish all of this. It would also impact council because we'd have to work with your timelines and maybe have to shift some of the timelines with clerks to make meetings work that we could get recommendation reports back on time. The results could also be then, as part of that is to compensate. If we're going to lose money, we might have to put up our fees to try to compensate for that. The alternative is somehow the public is paying for it one way or the other. So you could also drop your fees and not have to refund anything. But so there's different ways we'd have to play this out and take a look at this. And we're going to have to hope that the province makes some changes, or staff will have to come back later on in the year with some recommendations of how we're going to tackle dealing with this issue. Because as I noted, Bill 109 was passed this week, about a week and a half ago. So they did make some comments also around the site plan process, mostly along those same lines of that we have a time period to deal with the applications and process them quickly. They go moving them from 30 to 60 days. 60 is still quite a tough timeline. We often go through reviews with applicants at least 2 times, more likely 3 to 4 times. And each time it's probably about a month, about back and forth, like 2 weeks for us to get comments to them and then 2 weeks for them to get back. So 60 days is not a whole lot of time necessarily even on that, but you have delegated already down the staff, so that's not an issue. And we already move it through the process fairly quickly as much as we can. So concern here is going to be that refunding and being able to meet those timelines. The other process they're looking at is the subdivisions. They're looking at prescribing what can and cannot be required as part of a plan of subdivision and putting that in the Planning Act. Now, generally, we don't have too much of a concern in some respects, so long as it allows us flex to do what we want to do. So there is the standard, setting the types of units, the number of units, but we also want to make sure that the province gives us flexibility to put in the requirements around what we want to see for parkland development and how that parkland is development, like topsoil requirements. Same as our grading and drainage requirements. We want to have flexibility to implement those as we are wanting to see them take place. Some of our urban design controls, and as well as we're starting to move into looking at development of green standards and climate change concerns and how we bring them into subdivisions. Those kind of things, we have to have the opportunity to be able to put them in. So we do want the province to realize that those kind of things shouldn't be restricted and taken away from us. They should be open to the municipality, that these are things that have to be looked at as part of a good plan of subdivision. So we want to make sure the province is where we have concerns about what actually takes place and that what we're allowed to work with. There are another other list here as in the chart on the report. I'm not going to go through each and every one of them. I'm going to highlight the requirements that they want us to track and provide information on the status of applications. We don't currently have a process right now that does that internally. We would have to either purchase software or develop something and try to keep it up to date. So it's a bit of more staff time to keep something up to date. About 2 down from that one is the Minister of Municipal Affairs talking about stipulations on security bonds and how that works. I have written no concerns, but I found out actually that our finance department does have a bit of a concern how that looks. Mr. Petherick could add to that if he needs to, but they do want to make sure that certain bonds, ways of acquiring monies is still kept in place. I think that's about it, other than, as noted, timelines are pretty tight here to get this to the province to give them for information, and hopefully they do respond and listen and hear some of our concerns. The recommendation is before you, and if there's any other questions, I'm sure myself or anyone else will be happy to answer them.
Questions? Councillor Shantz.
I'm trying to wait to let other people put their hands up, but I also want to go home. What kind of fees are we talking about? Like, I guess I have no idea what we would be losing out if we had to refund all the money back.
So yes, through you, Madam Mayor, to the Councillor Sean. It depends on the applications. Obviously, we have different fee schedules structured for different types of applications. On a very minor application, when you're dealing with, say, with a small agricultural issue, we're talking maybe $7,000. Okay, but if you're talking a plan of subdivision, we could be talking $50,000, $60,000. Okay, so there's, subdivisions are obviously bigger. Gravel pits are much more expensive too, around the $50,000. So the big ones would be significant amounts, and the smaller ones definitely they would tally up if you never hit your targets, obviously. But we'd be talking, our budget is, we're usually trying to collect around over $100,000 to $200,000 in our budget line. So that's $200,000 off a budget line that's got to be made up somewhere else if we're refunding.
Yeah, and obviously the bigger the project, the more it costs. I guess I never thought of the gravel pit end of it, but the other end of it, the plan of subdivision and some of the other agricultural things, could that be picked up in the building permit and by increasing that and bringing that higher, or does that not work?
Yes, unfortunately, no, we couldn't pick it up for the building permit. You could put it onto the general levy, and the general population just pays for it, and the applicant pays like a minimal amount just to submit for his own change, let's say $100, and then we just budget it against the general levy, so everybody else pays for it in the sense then the developer doesn't, but the public pays for it. Alternatively, like the other thought would be is if we were trying to balance it a little better, is to up the fees to make sure that if we do have to refund, we're still trying to hit a balanced budget in the end, that we're gonna assume we're gonna give up, we're gonna aim for this, assume we're not gonna hit that budget line and then over account for it by this much, just assume we're gonna actually balance out. So it's gonna be playing with budget numbers, which would make things challenging. It's not the best way to budget, as I'm sure your Director of Finance would suggest, and it's just gonna cost more staff time in terms of calculating it out and trying to refund people. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Patrick, okay, Councillor Martin, go ahead.
Okay, thank you to Jeremy. When an outside agency takes a month and a half to get back, not knowing who the agency is, do they have a history of taking that long? Is it because they don't have enough help? Is it not a priority? Do we have any idea? Or what's the average time for somebody to comment on an issue?
Yes, good question. Average times, most of the time, I'd say probably about 80% of the time, outside agencies are giving us comments right around the time we're having the public meeting. And that's the way we have it structured, so that we get kind of all the comments together around one point of time. Now, the other 20%, it could be a week, could be 2 weeks later, that type of thing. And it could be for a variety of reasons. It could be, for example, they don't have the resources, or they are at that point of time, or it's summer holidays and the person they needs to review it isn't around because they need the specialist to review it that's on their staff, for example. So it can be resources, and oftentimes that they just don't have the resources either to keep up.
Anyone else? Mr. Patrick, Mr. Vink suggested you might want to weigh in. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. I think one of the things that Mr. Vink did talk about was the security requirement. And so currently right now, our stipulation is letters of credit. And the thing with letters of credit is that if we needed to have the funds to, complete any of the work so the developer wasn't able to, we would be just drafting a letter to the bank and just ask the bank to say, no further questions asked other than give us the money. It's part of the stipulation in the development agreement that we can do that. With surety bondings, what happens is you actually work through the bonding company to do that. And there's just this back and forth because the bonding company doesn't want to give you the money. And we want to have the money. And so they're just back and forth, and they try to act almost like a mediator between ourselves and the developer. And that just means that things are just not going to get done when they really should be. Because if we're at that point, that really just means that something really has gone wrong, and we want to complete something for a health and safety perspective. And unfortunately, that just takes too much time if we go that route. And I think from our perspective, we want to still have the ability to dictate what kind of security we're going to need for our requirements.
Okay. Anything else, council? I'm kind of disappointed that this has been passed in the legislature before the comment time is up. But we'll assuming that council approves the recommendation, we'll send it in. And I wonder if we also send it to MPP Harris with a cover letter expressing our disappointment. Yes? Okay. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the motion then? Councillor McMillan, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vink. And Mr. Patrick, you are back. Waterloo North Hydro Holdco shareholder nominations and proxy.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So as council is aware, the merger between Waterloo North Hydro and Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro is proceeding, and it should be completed sometime later this year. However, Waterloo North Hydro is still an ongoing business, and there are still business that needs to be done. So a couple of things in the recommendation. One of them with regards to the proxy. The annual general meeting is being held next month, and we typically have the mayor represent the township at that meeting. And so this report is seeking council's approval to authorize Mayor Sean Stack as a proxy at the annual general meeting, which will be held next month, as I said. The other one is with the appointment of the independent director for Waterloo North Hydro. Currently, we have Mr. Arnold Drung as a representative, and just seeking council to continue to appoint Mr. Drung as our independent board member of Waterloo North Hydro until the date of the merger. And then the third part is with the townships that's ourselves, as well as in Wilmot, we are able to have one independent board member in the new merged company. And so we'll all be recommending, and as this report indicates, we'll be endorsing Arnold Drunk Act as that independent board member for the three of us. So with that, Madam Mayor, I'd be happy to take any questions council may have.
Thank you. Any questions, council? No? Okay, thank you. I think it's good that Mr. Drung has agreed to stay on, to have some continuity between the new corporation and the existing one. So can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Redekop. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Greenhouse Road Reconstruction Project, selection of engineering consultant, Mr. Poupé.
Thank you, Mayor Schatz, and through you to members of council. Before you tonight is IS 10-2022. We are recommending the approval to have AECom Canada Limited be awarded the project for engineering services on the Greenhouse Road reconstruction. That would be commencing this year with construction anticipated in 2024. We're also seeking council's authorization for land purchase negotiations. As council is aware, we would always bring back any negotiated costs for council's consideration prior to execution. And this just allows us to move forward. There are some land parcels needing to be purchased along the corridor. The road currently ends at Cramp, and we are looking to extend the roadway further south to have a secondary access, as the report details, into the Thomasfield subdivision. This project has been on the books for some time. We are waiting for more build-out to occur, which is happening. So I think the timing of this project is excellent right now. And you'll see the urbanization of Greenhouse Road. I believe it's a 26-meter wide road allowance. This will have the whole suite of services with curb, gutter, pedestrian facilities, and the like, with the ability to have multi-lanes depending on how things develop out in Breslau. And with that, I would be happy to, one other thing that wasn't mentioned in the report, I apologize. appeal for the construction services approval of construction services would be brought forward for council's consideration at the time of tender award to construction. We typically say that in the report, and that was my miss. I apologize, but just so we're clear, we would be recommending AECOM to continue right through to construction, and that council would see that report at the time of tender award. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions council may have.
Thank you. Questions? Not seeing anyone. Would Councillor Shantz?
Yeah, thank you. Through you to Jared. I know that we've done some work out there. Actually, I guess, I'm not sure what was the region or the Ontario government with the set of lights and stuff on Victoria Street. Does this tie right in with that, or do they have to do any work with those lights then in the future?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Shantz, it's my understanding that was work required as part of the Thomas Field development, and that intersection is now set up for that build out of that intersection.
Okay, so they don't have to move any of the standards or anything like that. It was already pre-designed for that.
And that's my understanding. That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'll move the report.
Okay, is there a seconder? Councillor Martin. Any other discussion? All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Pay. Mayor's report on regional matters. We do have an all council meeting this Friday, and you can attend either in the council chambers, the regional council chambers, or remotely as you see fit. And I think there was a communication that went out today on that. I'm not sure if you might need to get back to staff so they know how many people to expect. I attended a couple of live events this week. That was a novel thing. One was the grand opening of the domestic arrivals at the airport. So that building, if you've all been to the airport, that building alone is the same size as the existing building. So it's really nice and open with a couple of conveyor belts for luggage and nice space. And the other main thing that you would have heard in the news is that Waterloo Region Police are recruiting for a new chief. So as a member of the Police Services Board, I'll be involved with that as well. And I think that's all for me. Any other reports from council? No. Councillor Martin?
Yeah, thank you. I have a question for Jared, if I may, please, if he's still here.
Sure.
There he is. Do we still have a road patrol that checks our roads weekly or bi-weekly? Or is that just something we do in the wintertime?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Martin, it's increased through the winter. So it's all temperature dependent through the months where we're still in winter. But we have our standard road patrol that occurs based on our road classification. So we do road patrols all the time, but I think class, I forget how it's worked, but it might be 1 week. You might have to just attend an inspection once a week for certain classifications of roads. So it's much different than in the winter patrol.
Okay, my question would be this. For the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've driven Henry Street and Three Bridges Road going out to Lobsinger. There's some brutal potholes in there week after week, and they're not picked up. Now, I know well enough that we don't have enough. We've got one hot box and we've got a lot of potholes, and we're not going to get them all, but we've got to get a crew out there with premix or something to fix them up temporarily. Like, they are bad.
Okay. Yep, and weather dependent too, obviously, right? We don't, but absolutely, we can take that note, and we'll talk to operations and see if they can attend.
Yeah, and that's exactly the reason I wanted, instead of hiring 4 people in June, I wanted 2 months earlier. The other 2 could have been 2 months later, so that they could take care of some of this. That's just for the rest of you.
Message received.
If we had done that, you wouldn't have been able to say, I told you so, Councillor Martin.
I didn't say I told you so. Don't put words in my mouth. It's just that I've got a background in municipal service. I know what we have to do in the spring. I know what the priorities are, and I just tried to bring that to the table. Maybe I did a poor job.
Okay, thank you. And I did notice that the potholes at the end of my street were filled today. So thank you for that. Outstanding activity list. Anything else? Nope, seeing nothing on that. There's no notice of motion. I need a motion that the following bylaws in the hands of the clerk be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed, and that they be numbered as bylaw number 21-2022 to 24-2022, and that they be signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with the corporate seal. And you can see those 5 bylaws on your agenda. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Shantz, Councillor Redekop, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And that brings us to the end of our agenda. Someone like to move adjournment? Or you want to stay? Councillor McMillan, Councillor Martin, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much, everyone. Our next regular session is Monday, May 16th, 2022 for council. And in closing, council would like to thank all who participated or tuned into the meeting tonight on our YouTube live stream. And I will remind council to stay connected until we receive confirmation that the live stream has stopped. Good night, everyone. We lost Councillor McMillan already. There he is.